It's likely going to happen at some point that you get a phone call out of the blue, or that somebody in your city group stays behind to talk to you after the rest of the group leaves, and you get a bombshell dropped in your lap. I mean, it's a crisis, it's an emergency, and you have no idea what to do with this heavy revelation that's just been given to you. One of the best parts about small groups is that we form these deep relationships in a community where we get to walk through all the seasons of life together. But that includes the messy parts of life, right? That includes the crises. And as leaders, we're often one of the first people to hear about what's going on. But it's often difficult in that moment to know what to do or what to say right then. In this video, I want to give you a framework for how to think about your role in these situations. And then I want to give you some basic tools to help you care for those in your city group. My goal isn't to prepare you fully for every kind of crisis that could come up, as if that were even possible. It's much more helpful if we have a general plan in place in our minds, and then we have some principles so that we can adapt to whatever crisis may occur. So first, we'll define what we mean by a crisis, and then we'll talk about your role as a city group leader, and then finally, we'll look at some principles for what you can do to help. So what do we mean by crisis? Well, loosely speaking, it's any major life disaster or difficult season of life. Now, this is a non-exhaustive list, but in my experience in leading city groups, here are the ones that I've seen most often. There are health crises, either the person themselves or somebody that they love, a cancer diagnosis, a traumatic injury, the loss of a loved one, a miscarriage or a difficult birth. There are relationship crises, a marriage that's going through a rocky patch, a parent-child conflict, an issue with a roommate, a major breakup or calling off of an engagement. There are mental health crises. There's deep depression, panic attacks and anxiety, struggles with eating disorders or addictions, or at the most extreme, thoughts of suicide. There are financial crises, the unexpected expense like a car breakdown or a medical bill, the sudden loss of a career job, a stock market crash. And then finally, there are spiritual crises, the crisis of faith, the sudden doubt in everything you've known and believed, the big, scary existential questions that can keep you up at night. And in my experience, these spiritual crises are often triggered or accompanied by one of the other kinds of crises. Now again, this isn't every situation that can ever happen. Your group may be going through something different right now, but with the heavy weight of all these things and more, with all the experiences of living in a fallen world, what is our role when we enter into these situations? What are we responsible for? Now, this is the most important thing I'm going to say in the entire video. You are not God, and that's a good thing. We are not called to fix, solve, or rescue. Rather, we are agents of the fixer, the God who controls all things. We trust that the Lord cares about the person in crisis even more than we do. And we hold on to the truth that He does work all things for good without feeling the need to prove that to the person in crisis right now. So remind yourself of this daily. You are not God, and that is good news. Here's how Paul described our role in 2 Corinthians 1, verses 3 and 4. Blessed be the God and Father of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Father of mercies and the God of all comfort, who comforts us in all our afflictions, so that we may be able to comfort those who are in any affliction, with the comfort with which we ourselves are comforted by God. Now look again at that last line. Any comfort we give to those who are in crisis has been given to us by God. We are not the Savior. We are some of the tools and means that he uses to comfort those who are suffering. And that's not just us as individuals, that's us as the whole body, the whole church family. So practically, that means that our job is just to play our role. And then we trust that God will not only fill in the gaps of what we can't do as limited human beings, but he will also be actively involved in everything that we are doing. So, with all that being said, what is our specific role as city group leaders in a crisis? So, two medical analogies are helpful here. When a crisis happens, city group leaders are often the first responders, right? The first people on the scene. You're the people in the ambulance. And you have two main tasks. First, to provide first aid to the best of your ability. More on that later. And second, your task is to help the person in crisis get to the specialist care that they need, whether that's a pastor, a counselor, or something else. And then, after the initial emergency is winding down, you might have more involvement, kind of like a post-operation physical therapist, just helping your person in the slow, ongoing recovery as they get back on their feet. Understanding your role puts responsibility on you. You do have a part to play when a crisis happens. But it also frees you to not take the weight of the world on your shoulders. God is the ultimate comforter, and he uses you, he uses pastors and elders, and he uses the whole church family to help hurting people. So, now that we know our role, let's get to the practical stuff. Here are 5 basics of care in a crisis. First, thank the person for bringing you into this situation. Sometimes we have barriers to care in our own hearts, unpleasant thoughts like, oh boy, this is going to eat up a lot of my time. Or some of you have the opposite problem of you just jump feet first in, oh no, I want to do everything I can to help. It changes everything if we recognize that bringing up a crisis itself can be an extremely vulnerable act, and honoring that maintains and builds trust. So reaffirm the relationship with them. I am so honored that you brought this to me, and I want you to know that I care about you. Our whole city group cares about you, and we are here for whatever you need. In that crucial, dare I say, holy moment, you are communicating that it's safe to talk about these things and that you are committed to their well-being. Second, presence often matters more than words. I've heard it from countless people who have gone through a crisis that what they remember most from their community was who showed up, not what they said. Now, don't hear what I'm not saying. Words are important. I believe that. But resist the urge to try and say something profound. The cliches rarely work. You know the type, I know exactly what you're going through. You probably don't. Or the Lord works all things for good and all things shall pass, which is true, but not helpful in that moment. Or there's have you tried insert obvious first option here? They probably have tried that. If you need to say something, keep it honest. You can even say, I don't really know what to say right now, but I'm hurting with you. And then show up. When somebody brings something hard to you, give them your full attention right then and there. And then follow up with them. Visit them in the hospital, bring them a meal, send them a text in the middle of the day. Show them that they are not forgotten. And don't just do that for a week. Put a reminder in your calendar to check in with them 2 weeks from now, a month from now. If the person is comfortable bringing other people in to their crisis, if it's appropriate and they agree, then coordinate with the rest of your group and with the wider church to provide care for this person so it's not all on you. Third, assess without judgment. The reality is that not everything is truly a crisis. Sometimes it blows over quickly, or it just feels like a crisis to the person who's in the midst of it. But even then, our best response is never to downplay it, but to be a calming, non-anxious presence who is committed to grace and truth. So without being an interrogator, you can ask questions for clarification if there's parts of the story that you don't understand. Like, how long have you felt this depression? Or was there anything in particular that led to this huge argument with your spouse? For more examples of questions you can ask, in the description below, I put a link to a resource called Basic Questions to Ask in a Crisis. Getting a basic sense of the situation or fact-finding will help you make decisions about how to care for this person, and then how to explain it if you need to bring in somebody else, like a pastor or a counselor. Fourth, take the first step of care. So remember, this is first aid, and it looks differently based on what kind of crisis it is. So for example, in a financial crisis, you could rally the city group to meet that practical need, or you can ask the church for benevolence assistance if you can't cover the whole need. In a health crisis, the first step might be to set up a meal train or plan a visit to the hospital. In a mental health crisis, your first step is often to listen and pray and suggest that they bring this to a pastor or a counselor. In the description below, I've put some more resources, including the suicide hotline, a Christian counseling network that I know and recommend, and some books and articles on how to walk alongside someone in a crisis. So again, if you're ever in doubt about what that first step might be, if you're stuck, just give the pastors a call. That's what we're here for. Finally, caring for others takes a toll on us. So be sure to take care of yourself as well. You may be surprised at how this crisis affects you, whether it's difficulty sleeping or having difficulty concentrating at work, or even a growing anxiety in your own heart. Be aware of that. It's actually a sign of how deeply you care about your group members and how much you want people to be well. So as your pastor, I'll do my best in a crisis to check in with everyone involved, including you, but don't hesitate to tell me if you're having a hard time dealing with whatever is going on. A family cares for each other, and even caregivers need care. I hope this was helpful for you. My prayer is that the Lord will use us to care for our city groups well. If watching this video brought to mind a specific crisis that your group is going through right now, I would love to walk alongside you in it. So here's a question for you to consider after watching this video. If I myself were going through a life crisis right now, how would I want my city group to care for me? Till next time.